Her golden hair lay scattered messily across a soft goose-down pillow. Beads of perspiration had formed on the beauty's forehead. Finally, she had done what the king's lawful wife could not. She had given him an heir. Elizabeth Blount, also known as Bessie, arrived at the court of Henry VIII in March of 1512. Even then, at around 13 years old, she was a golden-haired, blue-eyed girl, lively, charming, and full of spirit. Elizabeth was born around the year 1500 at Kinlet Hall. She was the eldest daughter of Sir John Blount and his wife, Catherine Peshall of Kinlet. Once at court, Bessie quickly caught the attention of the nobility with her talents in dance and music, skills considered essential markers of a well-bred English lady at the time. Unfortunately, these were precisely the graces in which the devout and composed Queen Catherine of Aragon was lacking. Henry VIII valued more in women than just beauty. He sought a lady whose refinement would allow him to express his own chivalric ideals. Elizabeth soon found herself among the Queen's close circle of ladies-in-waiting, a privileged position that many noble young women both dreamed of and competed for. Within the Queen's private chambers, the women busied themselves with poetry, singing and dancing, needlework, reading, even gambling, not to mention prayers and the study of religious texts. Contrary to popular belief, Catherine's court was far from dreary. The Queen and her retinue frequently indulged in entertainment, feasts, dances, tournaments, plays, masquerades, and games were all regular features of the early Tudor court. Catherine took pride in the virtue and modesty of her ladies-in-waiting. Still, despite the Queen's diligence, affairs and secret romances often flourished behind her back. The court was always quick to notice a new, beautiful young lady. Though Elizabeth Blount came from a respectable family and drew attention from the nobles, noble blood and charm alone weren't enough to earn the kind of favor she received from the king. Her success made it clear that she was no ordinary girl. The king must have first noticed her at Greenwich, dressed for a theatrical performance in blue velvet, a golden cape, and a coif. Bessie played the role of a lady of Savoy, whom he was meant to rescue. Dancing by candlelight, graceful and quintessentially English, she was the perfect partner for the handsome, athletic young king. Bessie looked at the king with undisguised admiration, while Catherine of Aragon at first didn't even see her as competition. To Catherine, she was practically a child. How could such a girl be capable of cunning, especially when Catherine herself had personally instilled moral values in her? Besides, there were many other beautiful young ladies at court, more than willing to entertain Henry during the Queen's pregnancies. Did Catherine know about them? She wasn't foolish, and perhaps she even hoped that Henry's affairs were simply due to her own temporary inability to share his bed during pregnancy. At Christmas, while Catherine was recovering from the loss of her fourth child, she enjoyed the entertainments so much that she asked for them to be performed again in her private chambers, where Bessie danced as the king's partner. It's likely that by then, they were already intimate. Bessie wasn't the first woman to share the king's bed. Ironically, Catherine's own court was filled with beautiful, educated young women, temptations the king could hardly resist. At the time, it was believed that sexual relations during pregnancy could endanger the fetus and sour the mother's milk. It was also thought improper for a husband to abstain from pleasure during his wife's months of confinement. Though Henry tried to be discreet, he didn't always succeed in keeping his affairs secret from the Tudor court. Back in 1510, when Catherine was pregnant, Henry's flirtation with Anne, the sister of the Duke of Buckingham, sparked the first serious quarrel between the royal couple. During his father's lifetime, Henry had few opportunities to interact with women, and initially, his wife's attention was enough for the inexperienced young man. Thus, it's likely that Lady Anne Stafford was his first favorite. One New Year's Day, she received an expensive gift, perhaps as a reward for her services or as compensation for having to leave court when their secret affair became known to everyone, including the Queen. The mysterious Frenchwoman Étienne La Baume, mentioned only in one surviving letter, likely entertained the king during his time in France. Almost all of Henry's mistresses received jewels from him, a token of gratitude for their services and a price for their silence. However, none of them posed a real threat to the Queen, as these were mostly fleeting affairs. The favorites changed frequently until 1519. At one point, Bessie consulted a fortune teller for a few coins. Disturbed by her future, she confided in the woman about her predicament. Her sheets had been clean for over a month. Not a drop of blood. Was she to be punished for an out-of-wedlock pregnancy? Her fears were confirmed. Bessie was indeed with child. Should she get rid of the baby or tell the king? But if she terminated the pregnancy, she risked her life for the sake of the king's son, even if he was illegitimate. As soon as the king graced Bessie with his presence, he noticed a change in his once vibrant favorite. With her eyes slightly downcast, she began to speak in her soft, ringing voice. "Your Majesty." The beauty faltered, unable to continue. Henry frowned. What could have happened? Lady Blount boldly raised her eyes to the king and finally confessed, "I'm pregnant." Suddenly, the king swept her up under the arms and twirled her around. He was overjoyed. So what if the child was not of his lawful bed? He was the king. He would change the laws, grant titles, and acknowledge the child as his son. And Catherine, the proud daughter of Spanish monarchs, patiently endured all of Henry's infidelities. Now, there was still the matter of the church to deal with. At the time, Henry was a devout Catholic, and the church strongly condemned affairs and illegitimate children. Sins of the flesh were punished severely and publicly. Illegitimate children could be baptized and even acknowledged as heirs if their parents were married, but the stain of bastardy would follow them for life. Couples involved in adultery or cohabiting outside marriage faced harsh physical or financial penalties. Marriage was the ultimate goal for any respectable woman in Tudor times. That's precisely why Elizabeth Blount was so distressed. Who would marry a woman who had been ruined, who had borne the king an illegitimate child? Only if Henry himself arranged a match with a compliant man, one who knew of his wife's past indiscretions. In other royal families, an affair with the king and the birth of a bastard could even bring financial advantages. At the signing of the marriage contract between the 2-year-old Princess Mary and the Dauphin of France, Bessie accompanied the royal family as one of the dancers. After a lavish dinner in a hall adorned with enormous vases of silver and gold, a pantomime was performed by masked dancers dressed in the richest, most extravagant costumes. It was the last time Bessie appeared in public alongside the king. After news of her pregnancy spread, she was discreetly sent away from court to preserve secrecy. Though Bessie was not of royal blood, she was still significant enough to warrant proper respect. Given that the child was illegitimate, extreme caution was required. To ensure discretion, Henry entrusted the matter to Thomas Wolsey. Bessie was sent to the Augustinian Priory of St. Lawrence in Blackmore, Essex, where she awaited the birth of her child in a medieval residence, surrounded by a moat. Much to the king's delight, Bessie gave birth to a son. He was named Henry Fitzroy, his surname literally meaning son of the king. At just 6 years old, the boy was granted a grand title. But beautiful Bessie was only a brief respite for the king. Soon after the birth of their son, Henry lost interest in his former favorite. Everyone at court knew that the king finally had a long-awaited son, and that it was not the queen who had given him one. Bessie and her son were the talk of the court, but no one dared to challenge the king. No one asked uncomfortable questions, especially since Wolsey himself was overseeing Bessie's affairs. The constant presence of the bastard at court served as a painful reminder to Catherine of her own failure to produce a son, and of the uncertain future that awaited her daughter. For Henry, the birth of a healthy son gave him much to ponder. He had already begun to believe that his marriage to Catherine was invalid, and that God might grant him sons through other women. Interestingly, the king never seemed to consider marrying Bessie himself. Although, once Catherine reached menopause, a marriage to Miss Blount could have legitimized their son and paved the way for more children she might bear him. But time was not on Bessie's side. In those days, no one even imagined that Henry might divorce and marry a common gentlewoman. 10 years later, Bessie was already married to another man, and a far more formidable rival had appeared on the horizon, Anne Boleyn. Bessie married Gilbert Taleboys, the first Baron Taleboys of Kyme. It's likely that Wolsey himself arranged the match. In the years that followed, Bessie had little contact with her son. The boy was raised in a separate household, fitting for the king's acknowledged bastard. Even the French ambassador remarked that Henry showed genuine paternal affection for his handsome, red-haired son. Later, the boy was presented to Francis I and even represented the king in his absence in France. Bessie went on to have 3 more children with tail boys before becoming a widow. She then married again, this time to Edward, the 9th Baron Clinton, and bore him 3 children as well, only to be widowed once more, about 5 years later. During Henry's short-lived marriage to and of Cleves, Bessie returned to court as part of the Queen's entourage. However, due to declining health, she soon retired to her estate, where she passed away by the end of that same year. Fate was never kind to her. Elizabeth Blount was a charming, golden-haired beauty who may well have outshone even Jane Seymour in looks, but it's unlikely she ever dreamed of or hoped to wear the crown. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.